Okay, so let's get right into it. Today, we're going to unpack a wild story. It's about how one of the world's top AI companies went from being a super trusted partner for the Pentagon to getting blacklisted as a national security threat practically overnight. Seriously, this is a story all about power, about principles, and really about the battle over who gets to control the future of AI.
Right? It's a huge question. I mean, a partnership this important to national security doesn't just vaporize in a few hours for no reason. So you have to ask, what on earth was the breaking point? Let's dig in and figure it out.
All right, let's set the scene here. The way this all went down was just abrupt. It was public, and it shocked pretty much everyone in both the tech world and the defense community.
So it all kicked off with this bombshell directive, posted on social media by the president himself. And then, just moments later, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth made it official, designating the AI company Anthropic as a supply chain risk. Now, to give you some context, that's a label you usually see slapped on foreign hardware companies, not a leading American AI lab. It was a huge deal. And you have to understand, Anthropic wasn't just some small-time contractor. These guys were pioneers. They were the first AI lab to actually get their models up and running on the Pentagon's most secret classified networks. So to go from that level of deep, embedded trust to being completely shut out, it was a massive earthquake. So what happened?
To really get what caused this explosion, we've got to rewind the clock a little bit. We need to look at this fundamental disagreement that was building up behind the scenes. It was a battle over two very specific rules.
And boom, this slide really just lays it all out. This is the heart of the entire standoff. On one side, you've got Anthropic, and they're drawing two hard red lines. They're saying, look, our AI cannot be used for mass surveillance of Americans, period. And it can't be used for weapons that make life or death decisions without a human in the loop. On the other side, you've got the Pentagon, and their demand sounds simple. We need to be able to use this tech for all lawful purposes. The problem? Those two positions just could not coexist.
So let's be clear about what domestic mass surveillance actually means here. We're talking about the government buying up huge troves of data from private companies, stuff like your Google searches, your phone's GPS tracks, your credit card swipes, and then using powerful AI to sift through all of it. Anthropic's whole argument was that this technology was moving way faster than the law, and they just weren't going to be part of it.
Now, the Pentagon's perspective was also pretty straightforward. From their point of view, it's the elected government's job to decide how to protect the country, not a private tech company's. They basically said, hey, as long as what we're doing is legal, it needs to be an option.
So, why did the talks completely fall apart? Well, according to people who were in the room, the Pentagon would offer up language that looked like it agreed with Anthropic's rules, but it was filled with what one person called loopholey phrases. You know, things like, we agree not to do this, unless, of course, we deem it appropriate. For Anthropic, that just made the entire promise worthless, and that's when the deal died.
But here's where the story takes a major turn. Because right as this huge partnership is spectacularly imploding, Anthropic's biggest rival, OpenAI, was waiting right there in the wings.
You honestly can't make this timing up. Just look at this sequence. It all happens on a single Friday. In the morning, the talks between Anthropic and the Pentagon completely collapse. By the afternoon, the president has officially blacklisted the company, and then, just a few hours later, OpenAI announces that it has swooped in and signed its own deal. The speed of it all just looked bad, and it set off an immediate firestorm.
And what really got people upset was this. OpenAI's deal, at first, seemed to accept that exact all lawful purposes clause. You know, the one Anthropic just got blacklisted for rejecting. This caused a ton of confusion because, publicly, OpenAI had always said they held the same ethical positions as their rival. So people were asking, what gives?
The public backlash was so fast and so intense that OpenAI had no choice but to go into immediate damage control mode. And that led to a public apology and some pretty big changes to their brand new contract.
Yeah, OpenAI's CEO, Sam Altman, came out and basically admitted they messed up. He said they shouldn't have rushed the whole thing and flat out acknowledged that, quote, it just looked opportunistic and sloppy. That's a pretty rare thing to hear from the CEO of a company that big. And they backed up that apology with real action. OpenAI scrambled to amend its contract. They added specific language that directly banned domestic surveillance. They banned tracking people using that purchase data we talked about. They even got assurances that their tech wouldn't be handed over to intelligence agencies like the NSA. Basically, they ended up adopting the exact same protections that Anthropic had been fighting for all along. The Pentagon, of course, had its own version of events. In their official statement, they praised OpenAI for being willing to have a reasonable discussion. Meanwhile, they wrote off Anthropic's concerns as nothing more than personal vendettas. It was a pretty clear attempt to paint one company as the good, cooperative partner and the other as the difficult one.
So this whole mess forces us to zoom out and ask a much, much bigger question. And that brings us to our final section, the future of AI control. Because this isn't really just about one contract. It's about who gets to set the rules for what might be the most powerful technology humans have ever created.
I love this quote from MIT physicist Max Tegmark. He just puts the whole problem in such stark terms. He argues that this entire blow-up is really just a symptom of a massive failure of government. Think about it. We have regulations for sandwiches, but almost nothing legally binding for artificial intelligence.
And here's the core of his argument. For years, the AI industry has pushed back against regulation, always promising to police itself. But in doing that, they created what he calls a regulatory vacuum. And without any actual laws on the books to protect them, companies like Anthropic were left totally exposed when the government showed up with demands that crossed their moral lines.
And that leads us right here to the fundamental power struggle at the center of this whole story. On one hand, you have Silicon Valley's view that the people who build the tech have a right and maybe a responsibility to set ethical limits on it. And on the other, you have Washington's view that the elected government, and only the government, has the ultimate authority to decide how these tools are used for national security.
So when you strip it all away, this entire episode leaves us with this one essential and totally unresolved question. As this technology gets more and more powerful, who do we trust to draw the red lines? The people who create it or the people we elect to run our government? There is absolutely no easy answer here, but figuring one out is going to define all of our futures. Thanks for tuning in.